Do you know your child? Or do you think you know your child? And is that even possible to know your child? Well, a lot of parents have a certain image about their child. They probably have numerous ways to describe, you know, their child's character. Um, Hopefully they will, they can attribute a lot of positive qualities to their child, but sometimes uh, there appears to be also some negative ones, of course. I mean, no one is perfect. Everyone comes with positive and negative qualities. Like maybe they find their child to be shy or too insecure, or maybe a child is very hyperactive, or the child or teenager or young adolescent seems uninterested or rude, um, or weak or too emotional. I mean, you can think of a lot of different negative qualities. Um, but since, parents have experienced their child since birth, they must have a good sense of who their child really is, right? But what if there's something tricky with this idea? What if our child's behavior is a result of ourselves? Well, Stacy, how can you say that? You're probably thinking like, is it then my fault that my child is so insecure or doesn't listen or talk to me? Well, it's not that simple. And I'm gonna give you an example to explain certain, dynamics or patterns that can exist. So let us think of a flower, like for instance, my birth flower. It's a peony, I think it's called in English, and they're really beautiful. They stay in their bud for a long time until they fully blossom. So each flower, in its genetics, has the full potential to fully blossom at some point. But to reach that point, the flower needs, certain conditions to be able to do that. You know, think of enough sunlight. A flower needs sunlight to grow. Think of a rich soil and enough space, like enough space for the roots to grow into the soil. But also, flowers also need enough water. Um, so there are multiple elements and conditions that need to be met for a flower to be able to grow tall and fully blossom. And the same goes for children. I believe every child, um, in its genetics, has also the full potential to blossom into the person he or she is meant to be in life. But we're not always capable of doing that because certain conditions are not being met in our childhood, in our upbringing with our parents. And that is really important. So just like flowers, a child needs to be seen. A child, needs nourishment and needs enough space to grow big, to grow taller. Um, and they also need enough love and attention. And just like with flowers, there are many different kinds of children, um, because everyone is unique. So the genetics or the characters, might differ a lot between children of the same parents, for instance, and therefore their needs or their conditions might also be different. Some children really need a listening ear from their parents or need patience from their parents. Some children are really emotional, like character-wise or naturally, so they need a more emotional understanding of their parents. Some kids are really like active and want to play and want to do sports and need that more from their parents to join them into those activities. So there's no how do you say that, there's no format, like a fixed format that should be applied onto every child. The only format that there is that the needs of every particular child needs to be met in order for the child to be able to fully blossom. And this is difficult because this requires from the parent to be really observant and conscious of getting to know the child, like what is what is this child. I mean, maybe that sounds really weird, but what is this child about, and what does my child need, and how can I help and support this child in those needs. And if children are not met in their needs, then they will start acting differently than they are naturally inclined to. Like, for instance, let's say you have a child that is naturally really creative, but it grows up in a home with parents and other siblings where the focus is really on getting good grades in school and study hard and being very analytical and practical and logical. And then every time when the child comes to their parents to show their newest creations they made, and they are not being seen for it or appreciated for it, or it's being like literally pushed from the table, and they hear stuff like don't do silly stuff, focus on your work, on your studies, that's important. Then a child could possibly start neglecting those parts of him or herself. They will start maybe creating stuff or making stuff because what's the point, my parents don't find it important. But at the same time, they will not feel really seen for who they are, and because of that, as a result, they could stop sharing things with their parents. And I'm not talking about a singular event like parents doing that one time, and then I'm talking about like a childhood is like a longer period of time. So I'm talking about numerous multiple likewise situations. But it could also be, I'm just giving you the example of a creative child. Could also be a very funny child, or very sportive child that's really good in sports, and parents are not really celebrating that or encouraging that, and because of that a child will not feel really seen for who they are, because if the thing that is really important to the child is not being welcomed by the parents, then how can a child then feel um, safe and welcome? Like, over a period of time a child will feel like, you know being me is not good, because my parents don't think it's good, or enjoying the things I love is not good. And then children will not feel safe, they will stop sharing things, they will maybe withdraw, or they could get frustrated at their parents when they are older. Or and I just gave some examples about children's interests, but it also counts for how children deal with their emotions or their thoughts. Like, if you have a very emotional child, for instance, and the parents are not really emotional or not really in touch with their emotional world, then parents are then really challenged in areas that they are not comfortable in. So if a child is then really emotional and a parent is not comfortable in in this area, then a parent could react in a way like, don't be too emotional, or don't be so weak, or um, just keep doing what you're doing, and stop complaining. And so the parent will not have the right tools to comfort the child, to assure the child, um, you know to deal with the child in that emotional state. And as a result, then children will stop sharing or stop showing these emotions, because when they've done it before, they got rather punished for it or judged for it, or so they won't feel safe anymore to share that with their parents, whether it's emotions or thoughts, or whenever parents react in a judgmental way, or like a really quick fix to solution oriented way, then children will start to over time children will start to feel like, I can't share what I'm going through with my parents, because I'm not feeling better after it, because I'm actually feeling worse after it, because I'm even being judged for feeling this way, and my parents don't understand me. And when children don't feel understood, then they withdraw in themselves, maybe lock themselves up in the room, stop sharing things, because when they think of sharing it with their parents, they already anticipate a kind of reaction that they've gotten many times before. So as a result, when these things happen a lot, then children will start to feel less secure in the relationship with their parents, and their behavior towards the parents will change, because they will either withdraw, or they will get frustrated, or they will get rude, because they don't feel seen and they don't feel understood by their parents. And then while this is going on, parents create an image of their child and then see it as, yeah, that's how my child is. Those are character traits of my child. My child is rude, or my child is, is not social because he or she doesn't talk or doesn't like to, be among us in the living room, or but that's only like a consequence of the interactions that the child had before with his or her parents. The interactions wherein the child tried to show pieces of themselves but weren't really welcomed or celebrated, or you know and in those cases it can happen that children, when you see your children interact with other people, you're like, is this my child? Like, of course children are always different than, with their friends than they are with their parents. I mean, some little difference is normal, but it also has to do with how secure as a child, felt with the parents, to share and to be themselves, actually. And then it would be wrong to conclude for parents that their child, is like that, the way they see their child, the way they see their child behave, because they are always a part, of that thing they see from their child, a part of the dynamic that happens with, between them. And then the image, of parents, the image that parents have of their children, thinking that they know their children, is not always right. And I know that, it can be hard as a parent, speaking as a parent myself, like society is not always easy, with work, with responsibilities, with school, your children's school, your children's activities, and then your relationship that you need to nourish as well, like the relationship with your partner, the relationship with your colleagues, maybe you have work stress as well, maybe you have financial stress, maybe family stress, so there can be a lot of stress factors where we might not always be as responsive or attentive, or towards our children. So I'm not condemning you with, if you one time haven't listened to your child, or have reacted in an impatient way towards your child, but I'm really talking about the situations wherein things go on for a longer period of time and children start, to lose themselves. And in a way, you as a parent start to lose them because you don't know anymore who your child really is. So to really know, your children, or to really know your child, we have to know what kind of flower we are having and what the needs are of our particular flower. And we can only do that if we look at our child, if we are attentive, if we are understanding, if we are patient. So whenever our child, comes to us as parents and wants to share something like a thought or a creation they made, or they want to show how far they can jump from one couch to the other, or try not to dismiss those moments or neglect those moments, because those are little moments wherein a child tries to reconnect with their parents or to connect with their parents. And these moments in the long run are really valuable and makes a child, feel seen, feel understood, feel valued and loved. And eventually that will result in a beautiful blossoming flower that you really, got to know. So I hope I hope this has been helpful, and see you later. Bye bye.